I am super excited today to be talking to Ron Hetrick, who is a fabulous economist, and specifically in the areas that I'm most passionate about, which is skill trades. And so, Ron, for the audience who may not be as familiar with your writings, do you mind sharing a little bit about your work, how you got started into this specific type of work in the skilled trades industry?
I have been an economist for about 33 years, but the beginning is where this all kind of sets up. So when I got out of grad school, I went straight to the Bureau of Labor Statistics in DC, and my first assignment as an economist was manufacturing. So I became a manufacturing economist and oversaw all of that while I was there, and then ended up becoming a supervisor of construction and manufacturing, so the goods producing side when I was at BLS. And so during that time, I really started becoming really fascinated with just the data around it. So everything from auto manufacturing to homes and how that kind of tied into everything else. Then I went into the staffing industry for 20 years, not as a recruiter or salesperson, but literally as an economist, a person who finally was trying to just bring perspective into things. And really the where it kind of evolved in that world was you would always have people who were like, look, you all used to be really good at finding us people, but now you're not good, and we think you stink, and we want to get rid of you. And it turns out that what was happening was the market had changed dramatically,
Right.
and what used to be around was not around anymore, or the pay rates that you were paying hadn't been updated in 5 years, and the market had moved away. So I kind of gained my reputation, over that career in providing the context for what was happening in order to kind of protect business, but also sometimes just to kind of wake a client up. Like, even if you get rid of us, understand the next company that comes in here is just going to struggle just like we did. And then I came to MC, now Lightcast, and really right away, the fall of 2020, we had a high unemployment rate, but I wrote something at the time saying, where did all the men go?
Mm.
And I could see this happening at the beginning of the year as the pandemic was unfolding, that you were going to probably have a high unemployment rate, but nobody looking for work. And that blog went crazy at the end of 2020. It was one of I think, the most read blog we had ever had to that point. And so started writing demographic drought, doing drought. I started getting more curious about it. So I wrote Who's Going to Do the Work? And Who's Going to Do the Work specifically was a piece to really hone in on skilled trades, where we started saying, what are we going to do? If two out of every three people who gets out of high school immediately enrolls in a 4-year program, goes to college, and our labor pool is so overweighted towards people with degrees, how are we going to get work done? Like, as everybody's doing these degrees, who's actually going to do the work? And so that paper was really about the stigma around it, understanding the kind of messaging people were getting, what the kind of peer pressure they were getting, not only from their guidance counselors, but their classmates, their parents, parents who were like, look, I didn't do all this, so you wouldn't go to college, you're going to go to college. But I just realized, society had painted such a toxic picture of it that we were in a real crisis because we have to undo all of that, and we only have a couple of years to do it. And we're in the midst of that right now. And despite people saying, this is the tool belt generation, the data just doesn't support it. We still just had the largest entering freshman class at college in history last fall. So, I don't think we're much closer to solving this problem than where we were. And I do believe not a lot of it, I believe the issue is messaging, because the careers can be everything that they want. And that's what we talked about and Who's Going to Do the Work. If you want ownership, if you want to see career progression, if you want flexible hours, you'll get there faster through skilled trades than you would, going through a corporate setting. So really, it's what it was about.
What signals should owners or HR leaders and teams watch for that confirm that this isn't going to self-correct? You had mentioned that, we're in a shortage that is structural and
Yeah.
generational, not necessarily cyclical. Do you mind explaining a little bit about what those differences are? And then what is it that people should understand why it's not self-correcting?
Yeah. First things first, this is the last year where we will net an increase in high school graduates. Starting this graduating class onward, we will graduate fewer and fewer seniors forever. And I mean, and it really falls off a cliff in a number of years. So everybody's going to be scrambling for young people. Universities are going to get more desperate to try to fill their ranks. They got to pay themselves. And other companies that are looking for that entering labor force will find that that labor force is disappearing. In fact, In the next 10 years, you're going to see the 16 to 24-year-old labor force decline by about 2 million. The population of 16 to 20 or 24 and under, the total population of 24 and under will decline by 7 million between now and 2034, while the older population, 65 and older, is growing by 9 million. So we're going to need a lot of people who want skilled trades, people to come fix, their air conditioning or to install something at the same time that we're watching young people kind of disappear. So that is a structural problem in and of itself. The other issue is that despite what people say, and you get different messages over different years, a lot of somehow been some kind of thing that somehow universities became less popular. They're very expensive. You have to pay all that debt back. People aren't seeing the value proposition in universities that they used to see. And what I found is the data just doesn't support it. Like I think we all believe that. We can certainly find anecdotes of people doing that, but the data still overwhelmingly shows that, the majority of kids by far go in. Now, do they graduate in time? Sometimes they drop out, do all of these things. Well, all of these various things happen. But one thing it's not changing is the unemployment rate for install, maintenance, and repair, where we see most of the skilled trades or the construction occupations. We're seeing unemployment rates that have historically been associated with the highest level professional roles. We have a lower unemployment rate in IMR than we have in computer professional IT degrees. And this is something that for years we talked about labor shortages and it was STEM. But now you talk about labor shortages in a different way. Now it's more your production occupations and your construction occupations. I think it was last month, construction had the fewest unemployed people that had ever been recorded, or if they could maybe 1 month in history that had ever been that low. And IMR is in the same situation. So you have a messaging that we've been doing for 30 years, telling everybody, if you don't go to college, you're a loser. And lo and behold, they listened. And the reality was everything changed. In the past decade, things have been changing. Skilled trades are starting to make really good money. The opportunity for ownership or advancement has changed dramatically, but that message definitely has not made it to Main Street. It's in certain communities, certain rural areas. Certain states have some programs with it, but blanket across the U.S., you don't see it. It's just a lot of empty words so far. And I think that that's the other biggest problem is there's still this, you still see it from a policy side, from the very top levels of the country on down, that everybody should be able to go to college and we need more college assistance programs. And that's all the wrong messaging. You can always do those things. You can always go to college. But the reality is what we really need is for people to say, hey, there are so many different routes. And maybe you add college at some point just so when you're running your own business, you can do your numbers better or whatever. But I think that that's something we've just gotten wrong is we need more people exposed to these jobs when they're younger because there's going to be fewer of them anyway.
The funny part is that you talk about the fact that, I think a lot of people have this mindset, oh, well, they just don't realize how well it pays. And you touched on that a little bit.
Yeah.
But your research actually shows almost three-fourths know this is a great paying job.
Yeah. Young kids, but not their parents. And see, there's a problem there because what we were digging into was peer pressure is a funny thing. So you get it from guidance counselors who are like, what college prep classes are you taking? Now, are you lined up? Like, you're not going to get into the college of your choice. And so kids are bombarded with a single message of this is what success looks like. But you also, like I said, you have your parents who, and I've heard this firsthand from many parents and speaking around the country, where they will say things like, I feel really ashamed or embarrassed because my kid came to me and they said they wanted to do this. And I said, absolutely not. You're going to college. And then you come in and say, no, this is a really legit career that we actually need versus a lot of these degrees that we're producing. And I think that there's that part. And then the other part of it, of course, is your friends. So, we tell people in the skilled trades industry, you've got to reach out to these people, these kids when they're younger and younger, like middle school, but you've got to stay beside them. Because what happens is they may want to go down that route and then they get to their senior year of high school and all their friends are like, hey, what university are you going to? What college are you going to? I'm going to this one. And all of a sudden, that single-minded person who is going to go do this gets talked out of it. And then they start pursuing another route. So I think it's just that societal thing from so many different angles that there's not enough Mike Rowe's in this world. There's way too many, people who are still saying that, this is, I grew up in the 70s, the college is the way. And it's like, it was the way. Right. But it's no longer the way. There are many ways.
One of the things that you also discussed was something that's called the minimum viable early talent strategy, being able to target for high schoolers in
Yes.
young age. Do you mind describing that in some detail for us about, if you're advising me today and I'm an
Yeah.
owner and I'm thinking about what are you talking about? I'm going to start getting freshmen, sophomore, like how does that work?
What it means is I believe that everything can be reduced to one thing, and that is drive. You give me somebody with drive, and I can do anything with them. And I've lived this out in my own professional career. I've taken people in with nary an ounce of background in labor economics, for example, and I have with my own drive and passion, I've implanted that into them and watched them have incredible careers and seen them get angry and passionate about labor data of all things. And I think that that's the same thing. When you see in the skilled trades industry, there's just such a difference between the way we market these roles. So if I'm in a professional company and you look at my job posting, I've got a whole lot of what we do and here's what we're doing and this is the valuable thing and we do this and we do give to these charities. And then you go and you look over in the skilled trade side, it's like, I need an electrician apprentice, $17 an hour. Bye. It's like there's no value of, we know that that's an important job, but you're not dealing with people who come from a marketing background or come from a background where they've had to you know excite people with what they're doing. And yet I'll look at these skilled trades people, I'm like, you're doing the most valuable work. Same with healthcare. When they say they can't fill their positions, I'm like, it's the most valuable. Keeping people alive is the most valuable, and skilled trades is right there with it. Construction and healthcare sit at that kind of highest value to society roles, but we don't talk about things in those manners. But I think the way that we can get past that is people who are in the skilled trades industry need to take the passion they have for what they do, and they need to, excuse me, they need to get in front of young people and show them why they've been doing this for 20 years. What satisfaction they get out of doing this. What's been the most rewarding job they worked on? That needs to end up on a website. That needs to end up on something that is handed to somebody. The best thing you can do, and this is something I actually watched, it was a guy, his job was to do this, is to go on, if you have any presence whatsoever, especially a website, go on there and see how exciting the first page is. The very first thing you see. Is it exciting? Like, is it stimulating? Does it make you like, wow, this is really cool? I shouldn't have to even click to the careers page. And by the way, when I click to the careers page, it better not just be a list of postings you have or things like that. It should be some cool thing that somebody's doing. Like, it's the visual aspect that people are relating to. And we see, I think, just there's a misunderstanding, and probably because people believe there's so many workers out there waiting, lined up for their jobs, that you don't realize how much you have to sell. And for young people in particular who've been brought up in this kind of environment, man, that sell is everything.
It makes my heart feel so good because that's one of the things that we really stress as well is, that career page that's where you get to show your culture off. That's what's
That's
going
right.
to make them excited to see you. Since we're talking a little bit about the minimum, or excuse me, the younger ones, and we're talking about reaching out to high schoolers, obviously the first thing that's going to be available to them are apprenticeships. But
Yes.
there are apprenticeships, and then there are actual apprenticeships that lead to jobs. When you look across the landscape of what separates those types of programs, when you look across the landscape, what separates apprenticeship programs that consistently convert participants into long-term jobs versus those that are just used for marketing, what separates them in your own experience when you've been working with other employers?
Yeah, intentionality is the thing. I can do this across any business, and I've spoken to so many different people. There are people who have almost like a program. It's a bring your prospective person to work day. Like there's not an intentionality there. I've always said that anytime, whether it's a summer intern, whether it's an apprentice, mentorships or anything, the intention is that you have identified a person that you see as having a future in your organization. And at no point should you be expecting or going into it with the expectation of, hey, they're going to separate from me one day and that'll be, we'll put this person to society. If a person's really, really good, then you create a capability around them. And you can almost see this. We use professional sports so much because it's incredibly relevant to when we talk about these kind of things. But you have a person, let's say you draft this person to come into a position, and you already had somebody there, and then the person's so good that you start to look at it and go, I got to find a role for them here. I got to find something. Or maybe this person, and they seem to love it here. They seem to love what we're doing. Maybe this gives me a chance to expand my business. Maybe I can now open another office or expand my territory. It's that intentionality that says I'm not looking at this as a transaction. I'm looking at this as a strategic thing that I'm trying to get accomplished. And when we take this person, the apprenticeship is not just teaching somebody to do a job. It's embedding your culture, seeing how they react to it, seeing how their work ethic is. And at the end of it, you're just like, hey, you know what? I wasn't overly impressed with this person. Then you can exit that person out, no harm, no foul. But the intentionality at the beginning should have been, we think we've identified a real promising person here, and we're going to create a pathway. If they turn out to be really good, we're already thinking of how we're going to utilize them going forward.
All right, so we've talked a little bit about setting the stage, and we've talked about the target audience that we were trying to get to. I want to shift our focus towards employer blind spots, because I think that there's a lot that we can all learn. You smile a little bit, so I'm sure you probably help us with that. One of the first things I always like to ask is, if I knew today back then, boy, I would have answered something differently this way. So we're about to go into 2026. We do this review every year, trying to think about, here's what we thought was going to happen. Here's what ended up happening. Yeah. If you could go back in time and talk to yourself a year ago, what would you stress more about? Here are the indications, they're becoming more and more pronounced. Or what would you have stressed less now that you've had the foresight of being able to see the entire 2025 year?
One of the things that we learned about 2025 is that when you introduce chaos into a job market, it crushes everything. It just freezes everything. The transactional items of life are still going to need to get done. So these businesses, there's really not a lot of business cycle, things like skilled trades, unless it's construction, in which case there's their own dynamics kind of going on there when it comes to immigration, the ability to get things done and built, and what you prioritize there. But I think with tariffs this year, what we found out was, in the past, you could kind of say the economy did this and it got weaker, and then it did this and it got stronger. What we realized is you can really jar that. So, COVID was an unnatural jarring, that really messed things up, but in a sense that messed the entire world up at one shot. But what we got to see this past year was, look, there are a lot of different things that can disrupt your plans. And, the best thing you can do is stay in the moment, stay very closely attached to what you're watching around you. And if things look like they're pausing, then maybe it's time to pause. I think this past year, we got to see very clearly that business leaders who probably had plans to hire or plans to be aggressive, as the year went on, they realized, look, selling this to a board or selling this to the people around me is going to be really difficult when everyone looks like they put the brakes on at the same time. So I think this year was a really good lesson in, just when you think everything that can happen in an economy, it can still be very, very different than what you expected. And as that unfolded, as the year went on, it became clear. So everybody, in the beginning, we speculated about it. By the end of the year, everybody went, look, no one wants to fire anybody. No one wants to hire anybody. Like they're just frozen until they can see this thing play out. But what that also taught us is that no one wanted to fire anybody. In fact, I'm not even convinced about the layoffs that we've seen per se. I think that there's a lot of layoffs that have occurred in tech industries, which kind of overinvested in the AI stuff. But, in general, you do see a lot of factories and everything that kind of were like, we think we know where we're at right now. We know what our input costs are going to be. We think we know how we're going to have to price things going forward. And I believe that once everybody cements that down and they believe that that's going to stay stable, then I think that at that point you're going to see more hiring going forward. But yeah, I think I keep calling 2025 just the wasted year, like where everything was just thrown into chaos. That chaos provided really good cover to revoke asylee statuses, which knocked about well over 1 million people out of the labor force. But at this point, we didn't need them as much as we did the prior several years. And I think at this point, I think we rebuild off of that. So I think 26 will also introduce a level of newness, because I think we're going to be coming back from the chaos. So regaining to norm after chaos will be, something as well.
Well, so we're talking about the labor shortage. A lot of employers use this as an opportunity to raise the experience requirements instead of trying to
Yeah.
lower them. From a labor economy perspective, what damage does this experience
Yeah.
inflation do to the long-term labor supply?
Yeah, I really wrote something this year called Danger of the Diamond. It's funny because I got Danger of the Diamond. The idea was actually it's I didn't come up with the term. It was told to me by somebody on a call about cybersecurity. And they were talking about all these young people going into cybersecurity. We have this massive labor shortage of cybersecurity. And I'm like, well, that doesn't compute. How can you have all these people going into it, but have a massive shortage? And like, well, everybody wants experienced people because it's cybersecurity. You don't want some young person doesn't know. They'd have to be young, right? I mean, you could be switching careers. You could be 80 and switching careers, but you don't have any experience. So in a sense, you're young at that job. Well, no one wants to hire that because there's a risk there. And I was like, well, that's a fascinating idea. So I took a step back and I started thinking about it in general for society. And so when I wrote Danger the Diamond, it's you're hoping, right? As a researcher, you start off with a hypothesis and you're like, man, I hope this is true because if it's not true, this is going to be a really wasted effort. And I want to really write this paper. And the data did not disappoint. We found out 80% of jobs are looking for somebody with 2 to 7 years experience. I'm sorry, 80% of postings are looking for someone with 2 to 7 years experience. About 10% are looking for a highly experienced person, and only about 10% are looking for somebody entry level. And even then, it can get a little tricky because it may even say like a year, but we were like being a little generous there. And it made me realize just how bad of a strategy that is. It's lazy, first off. Well, I want somebody with a couple years experience because I just want them to come in and hit the ground running. Well, you and everybody else. Okay, but there's a problem with that. Number one, these people, if you start to treat it, we'll go back to sports. This is the free agent rental market. You're not gaining employees, you're renting them at this stage because you're going after the same person everybody else is going after. So if they're chasing a dollar and they're going to get it from you, they're going to chase another dollar from somebody else because that's all it was about. I mean, that's why they're in this thing. They have the experience. That's what they're going for. Also, when you're pursuing a free agent in the free agent market, you have a tendency to overpay them versus what you're paying your incumbent workers. So you can create a very disloyal environment because the people coming in who've not proven themselves, who may not be acculturated, who don't have relationships, and you're paying them better than the people who've been there for several years, perform very, very well, have proven to be a solid part of the culture of the company. I think what also we really wanted to drive home is that if I take somebody, and once again, I've drank my own Kool-Aid. I've brought in people who had no experience, and they weren't all young. In fact, one person in particular had just worked in different jobs, then finished school, came to me right after that, and I hired her. And she didn't really have this experience, but once again, she had the passion and everything. So by taking this person, I was able to mold them very, very specifically. They didn't come in with a lot of preconceptions about work or work environments or what should be expected from a job. I showed them those things and they embraced that and went on and have a very, very good career. So I first-hand experience, like I keep saying this way about acculturation, like getting somebody in and getting them to believe in you and getting them to believe in what you're doing will gain you loyalty. They will forego pay increases or an offer from somewhere else for slightly more money or maybe even a lot of money because they're looking at this as going, real, I really love this and I love who I'm working for. And not just this person, but I love the people I'm around because they're all as fired up as I am. And I think that that's what you miss when you go into the rental market. I'm not saying not to do it, but I think there's a cost element there. There's a loyalty aspect there that I think no one can fully appreciate.
You've been in this talent space for a long time. Both of us have. We have probably had a lot of conversations with people about how to think about their labor. You talked about in The Rising Storm, which was a fabulous article. To anybody who's listening to this, I strongly urge you to get a chance to read this. You talk about labor scarcity as a permanent operating condition.
Yes.
Kind of let that soak in for people. What strategic decisions should leaders make differently if they assume labor will remain constrained for the next 10 years, as opposed to how they approached labor in the last five?
Well, I mean, the last five's been kind of tough. So it's actually been that's why we wrote Rising Storm to say you're kind of living in some outer bands. We're getting a good vision of what's coming to us, but what's coming to us definitely going to be a lot more intense than what we've experienced to this point. What changes for me, there's a couple things that I really believe strongly now more now than I ever have. One of the we call it sloppy attrition, and that is, well, people come and they go. I can't everybody can't be happy and everything. It's like that's an attitude of perpetual failure. What you want are what did you learn? Who did you bring in? Why did they work out? What is it about them that made them work out? Why did they stay? And how can I replicate that? Because I don't want to be flippant about, well, I just lost. Oh, that's a good person. That kind of stinks. Well, why did you lose them? Was it really a pay thing, or was there something about their supervisor? They didn't really like their supervisor, and maybe that supervisor is going to drive other people away, and maybe there were conversations you could have had, but you didn't do any of that. Data collection is something that I find it's funny me spending the past several years doing all of this. How many people come up to me like, I just love data, and there are people from all different walks of life, and I'm like, what's the best thing about data? You can create it yourself. So why don't you go create some? Why don't you start to look at, I put a posting up and I said this and I didn't get anybody applied. But when I said this, I got people applied. What was different about these things? What did people see in those postings that they liked? How are you going to replicate these things? I said this before. When you hire somebody, what was the background? Were they aimless? Because sometimes aimless is a good thing. Sometimes people stumble through life, and those are the best people because you showed them an opportunity and they're like, you know what, I think I like this. Or did they know they wanted to do this forever? I always wanted to be a electrician. I always wanted to be a carpenter. And I've always been really good with my hands. Are those the people that succeed? Is it a mixed bag? Can you tell me those things right now? If I sat down with you, could you answer all of those questions for me? Because that intentionality will help you to succeed in labor scarcity, because you're going to be making right decisions and you're not going to be wasting money doing it. You're going to be putting postings in the right places. You're going to go and market these jobs in front of the right people. You're going to go to the locations where they're at, versus waiting for people to come to you because maybe they don't even look on a job board. Maybe they're driving by and they see a sign, or maybe if it was over at this bar in town, they would have seen it. Like those kind of things help you to survive. And they're not the table stakes. Like, I'm sorry, these are the new table stakes. In the past, it was, well, I just tell people, I put a wanted ad up and we see who stumbles in. That this is what's changing. There needs to be an intentionality about it. There needs to be an understanding of what you have, more analytical. If you do these kind of things, that most of your competitors aren't doing those kind of things.
Right.
But the other thing I would say, particularly when it comes to skilled trades, and what I've seen a lot in the past year, because I've been hearing more success stories, are people that are owning that training responsibility as well. Is like what I was saying before, like, hey, we start in the high schools and we go and we kind of interview some kids, and then we like these, and then they come into our training program. So we're walking with them. And so when they get out, the day they're graduating, they're in, like they're on. And the thing about it, like I remember one company telling me, we're actually full. We can't even hire anybody anymore because every year we've brought somebody in who's so successful that we can't, like, we have no more room to do it. So we have to actually scale the program back. And it's like, why are they successful? And I asked them, I said, have you lost any of these people? And they're like, no. Like, they stay with us because we've been with them for so long. And I will always default to, most people want to go down the road where they can see what the road looks like versus the one that they're not quite sure where it goes. There are people out there who want an adventure. They don't want to know what tomorrow holds. But I'm finding out that more and more, especially Gen Zs, they want to see the path.
My thought process too with the Gen Zs is that they're running. I mean, when you and I came out of college or came out of school, we knew get a job and keep doing this. But they're running into this headwind where, are they going to be able to find a job? That's been one of the things that I think has been a real, for that generation. I almost feel bad for them. I teach Sunday school for high schoolers,
Yeah.
and I just think about what it's like for them to kind of walk into the labor market because they've had to face so much as compared to what we've had. And so I can see where that clarity is a huge asset for them. Like, okay, finally, something that seems real. Makes total sense.
Right.
Now you talked about, you've shared what the employers who get it, but there are still those who may not quite get the message yet. For those who are still kind of meandering into the wrong direction, what are the biggest mistakes that those employers are still making, specifically about skilled trades labor? What is it that they're not seeing the forest from the trees?
I think everybody wants, they're trying to succeed. They want to succeed. They certainly want to be able to do the business. I think one of the things we often do is first thing you have to understand, no matter how weak the market gets in various things right now, pay rates aren't going down. Now they are in the professional ranks, like high level developers, they're taking lower jobs now, lower paying jobs, certainly with other professional roles. But when you're talking about skilled trades, trying to save a dollar or two today is a really bad angle because what you're going to get is a person who, if they're really great, they're going to find out their market value really quickly so that you're renting them for a moment. If they're really happy to get a pay rate and you know it's below market, then something's wrong.
Mm.
We always say this. It's like, be careful of the person who goes, I'm fully qualified for this job. And you're going, man, I know I'm paying below market. And I know there's other people out there posting jobs right now. Like something doesn't add up here. And I think that you have to always make sure that you are very well aware of where the market's at. And so that when people come in front of you, you already can tell, like, I'm going to ask these questions of them because of this situation that I'm, like I say, with what I'm paying, or maybe the working conditions. You're like, look, this isn't the greatest working conditions. Maybe I need to double down on that because maybe they got a little over focused on this. But your goal is, I believe a goal of every business should be to prevent attrition. Now, there are people that disagree with that. Like sometimes you just have a bad mismatch and, free. And I've even lived in that environment. Like I've had to fire somebody because, this wasn't the best job for them, clearly. Like they were definitely meant to do something else in life. But what was different about these particular cases where I had to let people go is that those people were kind of forced upon me. So these are people who are being reassigned from other parts of the company, things like that. When I went out and hired my own people, I made a mistake basically one time, and that was just misread the body language. Misread, I thought there was a lot of enthusiasm that wasn't there. And I'm like, I own that. But you know what? That's one swing and miss at the plate. I've knocked a lot out of the park. Well, what was the difference there? It's like I walked into these things and I had questions that were really tried and true. And when you interview, making sure that you have those ringers, those questions that you're like, these are really indicative of the kind of person I know I'm going to get. And these should be questions, and these should be things around initiative and ownership and great communication. Like that's what you're looking for. And I think what people make a mistake is sometimes they go, hey, they're certified or they have so many years experience. And you're like, I'm just going to excuse the fact that they've had 5 jobs in the past 5 years. And, maybe not, I'm not going to do a background check. You're going to want to do a background check. They'll do your drug screenings. There's reasons for things. And I don't want to broad brush everybody and say, because I think it's bad. Sometimes, just bad circumstances can make a person have 5 jobs in 5 years. But there's warning signs out there that you have to be aware of. And I think sometimes in our desperation to fill a job, you introduce somebody who's a cultural poison. And so they end up doing more damage than they do good. And I think that that's all at the front. A quote that I read many, many years ago that has just been so relevant for my entire life. This was the owner of Southwest Airlines, and this quote is from literally the early 90s. He said, hiring is the freshet of the river. So if you pollute the beginning of the river, everything downstream is polluted. If you can get this part right, then everything else is going to work itself out. So I think the mistakes people make is not understanding that hiring is the most important thing. It's not flippant when somebody comes in and it doesn't work out, because that can they could have harassed somebody on the job. They could have worked with somebody who made them so mad that you end up losing one of your better employees. It's like, get this part right, do it right, pay correctly, interview correctly. Don't just try to fill the job. If you think a person's going to do more harm than good, make good decisions up front. And if you do that, things are probably going to work out down the stream. That's why everything we talked about at the beginning is important. Apprenticeships, that'll give you that insight. Getting to people earlier in life, walking beside them, it'll give you that insight. Desperation, posting a job, just quick, I need to fill this thing right now, not getting a whole lot of insight.
Yeah, no, and I love the fact that you talked about the interviewing part. Is that one of the things that I think a lot of ownership looks past is, have I trained these people? I've trained them to be managers. I've trained them to do this, but have I trained them to be skill and people evaluators?
Right.
And they don't. They just don't even think about it. It's well, they know how to talk to people. But there really are questions and reading body language and listening
Yes.
for tone and intonation that can be huge in terms of determining the right person and the wrong person. All right, so let's switch gears just a little bit. All right, so we've talked a little bit about the employers. We've talked about those who are younger in the workforce. Let's talk a little bit about. I know you're not a futurist, but let's talk about the automation and the use
Yep.
of artificial intelligence in the skilled trade space.
Yep.
For some people, they say there's never going to be a need for it because they're going to have to still fix with their hands.
Yep.
What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I've put actually writing a lot about this right now, commenting a lot about this right now. First things first, we can't confuse AI with robotics. They're two different things. And anybody who's doing high level robotics and things like that are probably not using large language models because it's not always accurate and
Right.
could be very dangerous. So I always want to make sure we kind of keep these things a little bit separate. Now, the point where I see the value of AI when it comes to things like trades are if I am really constrained and I need to get a person out to a site and they're out there and they don't really know what they're doing or they're approaching a problem they haven't really seen before, this is where this comes in handy. If I can get somebody up to speed faster, if I can get them to take a call on their own and they have a system there that they can type these things into and go, hey, this don't touch this, or this is probably this and this could be dangerous, so don't even work on this, or hey, this is probably just this, try looking at this first and doing that. That's a call that they may have had to make to a supervisor. It's a call they may have had to make back to the office. Instead, they don't have to make that call. I can't tell you how many times I've had technicians out to my house, whether it's installing like a cable or phone or something like that, and they're like, oh, I just ran into this, hold on, I got to go out and lob a call in and everything. And I always think about, well, if there was something there right in that moment, they could just look in and go, okay, I'm going to go out and try this. I think this is probably what it is. And they can solve these things on their own. They're learning, they become the relying on that. There's no harm in any of those things. That's great. If you're talking about it replacing a person, that's where I go, look, that's not really the market for it. And we get people are like, well, they're starting to use they're prefabbing sections of houses and everything. Like, that's cute. And then what happens at the point where they prefab the house? Like, what happens to it? It's like they have to go put it up. They have to go build it. And I'm like, and the train's not always the same, and everything's always a little different. And you have to make adjustments. It's like there's always going to be a need for people. The goal of where we take automation, in my opinion, and I've been talking about this for years, is the everything that we're doing should be aimed to make the lousy parts of a job less lousy.
Hmm.
Like at the end of the day, you're going to have to hammer a nail in. But we came up with nail guns to make the nail going in a much faster and less, physical process. Great invention. We should be looking at everything, every ounce of effort. That's why, you're actually seeing the most hired jobs right now in engineering are industrial engineers. Strange because it started to disappear for a while. But what we're getting into is now is we're really starting to look at what people are doing and going, why is this person grabbing this thing and going from here to there? Why don't we just do something that takes it from here to there? And I think that that's what, I think as well in skilled trades is that's something we have to be looking at. But the reason in Rising Storm and even my previous writings, I'm pretty negative, I'm pretty pessimistic about technology, is that the kind the kind of money that is being spent to develop these kind of things, they know they're not going to get they're not going to get their checks to pay for this stuff by franchise or small mom and pop business owners or small construction firms, things like that. They're not even trying. They're not even curious about that industry. They're looking at how can I get enterprise clients to write me a really massive check because I'm dropping trillions of dollars into my infrastructure. I'm going to need $1 trillion checks to come in. So this is where one thing I always try to tell you is they're not coming for you. Like they're not interested in you. They are interested in who can write them the biggest money. So any kind of, mom and pop franchise restaurants, franchise this, construction firms, drive around your town. As I always tell people, if you ever get scared of AI taking jobs, get in your car and drive around your town. And you will stop immediately because you're like, none of these things are going away. And most of these are family-owned businesses and things like that. Will they use these automation? Well, yeah, because we use cash registers. We
Right.
came up with swiping devices for credit cards. Yes, we can use technology to help do those things and make that job easier. But at the end of the day, the goal ultimately is to take away the nasty parts of a job and make the job more palatable. And that's my fear is what if we can't? Because we're still going to need people to do these jobs. And technology is probably not going to be able to do a whole lot to fix that problem. And I
Right.
would rather see the instead of billions invested in dreaming of how an LLM can do something amazing for you, I would rather you sit there and go, how can we design a toilet so that all it is just swap and play? Like literally that you just go and you twist it on the hinge and you take it and you get it out and you put the new one on, you twist it into place, and there you go. A new one's installed. It took my people 5 seconds to do this. That's what I want to see us investing in.
It reinforces the fact that it's not going to take the future automation is not going to relieve any of this pressure that we're feeling in the labor force. It's going to continue to get harder because these jobs are still going to be necessary. They're
The
still going to be.
pressure it's going to relieve is a pressure we don't even see. And like we look at things like AI and we look at now the messaging is changing even this year. All of a sudden, it's not necessarily replacement, maybe it's augmentation, but you're looking at it. These were beeline towards professional roles where we already had a huge surplus of people, a lot of people coming out of college. Well, we don't need that's not a problem. So you're solving a problem that doesn't exist. We have a problem over here, and I don't see the billions and trillions of dollars being invested to solve this problem.
That
And
makes
I
sense.
think that that's been what's so frustrating about it is I am way less concerned that I get a new app for my phone than I am that when I call somebody because my air conditioning broke in Florida, I need somebody to come out and fix my air conditioning. That's my concern.
Ron, because you started in manufacturing, you've talked a lot about home services. Of the manufacturing, construction, home services segments, is there one industry that you have more concern for when it comes to finding talent in the future,
Yes.
or is it all pretty much the same?
No, it's definitely different. What jumped out when we did Who's Going to Do the Work? Why don't you do these jobs? They're hard. They're outside. And we were like, well, it's hard to remove that. I think skilled trades in a factory environment, in a controlled environment where you go every day, you still go to the same place and you punch in and you're just there to kind of fix this machine if it breaks and everything like that. That's going to be an easier job to fill. I'm not going to say it's easy. I'm saying it's an easier job to fill than the person who's going to be like, hey, I need you to go up on roofs in the middle of summer and look for, holes and things like that. Or, oh, by the way, when you're fixing air conditioning in Florida, every single place you go to is not going to have air conditioning. So enjoy it while you're in your car because you're going to suffocate when you go into these homes. It's like that kind of environment is a really hard sell. And it came out in the survey. And for people who don't know, we interviewed 1,500 high school graduating high schoolers
Hmm.
and we asked them, what are you going to do when you get out? Why wouldn't you consider skilled trades? What are the things that, are kind of bothering you about that? All of these different factors. But that part, really jumped out at us was the very number one answer was it's hard. And we're like, well, that's going to be a tough one to overcome. You got me there, and I think that as business owners keep making improvements, as they keep kind of looking at it or talking to their employees about what do you really hate about this job? How could we make this better so that the next people come in here, hey, we have a new way we do this now, and it's not as brutal as it used to be, and our competitors are still doing it the old way, but you're going to be doing it the new way. That kind of stuff would be very interesting.
And so, of those three, it sounds like manufacturing may have the best odds in terms
I
of
believe
talent,
so. Yeah.
and it sounds like construction may have the worst odds because,
Which is why construction usually pays those people the highest
gotcha. No, that makes sense.
because you're asking them to go into an environment that's much more hostile. But yeah, I think that that's ultimately what you're coming down to is, if the environment is the nicer the environment, the easier you're going to be to get people into it. Or the second part of that, the easiest it's going to be to retain people.
Makes sense. Now, a lot of employers still assume pay is, the big lever for solving their labor shortages. I'll just overpay for
Yeah.
them. But I think your data says something different. What is it that you're seeing now? Where does compensation actually matter? And where does it get overcredited as a fix?
Yeah, what we found out, especially when we asked these young kids what they were looking for, pay just kept coming up like, well, look, I want to know that I'm doing something important. Like, Tell me what I'm doing is valuable. Like I want to go to bed at night and know that I did something valuable. And so we saw that theme came up over and over again uh, in the people that we interviewed, but we also saw it when we did research. When if you research the Z's or alphas, they have this common thing. It's like, look, pay is important. I don't want to be taken advantage of.
Of
But
course.
really, what I'm kind of concerned about is, am I doing something valuable to society? Is there a chance for, for ownership someday? Is there, because I'd like to have my own business someday. And we look at that and we go, wow, skilled trades is everything that these people say they want in life. It's everything. It's literally when you go to bed at night, you did something valuable that day. Like you'll be able to pinpoint exactly the things that you did. There are so many skilled trades that you can look at, and whether it's welding a ship together, whether it's fixing AC, whether it's electrical work or plumbing work, the proven value of that is everywhere. I mean, everybody wishes they knew they had those skills. We were talking about it earlier. Like, I've done plumbing, and that drip that occurs afterwards makes you insane. So we all value that skill set. We know that we value that skill set. We can tangibly appreciate that skill set. And I think that this is something where I think people who are in the skilled trades business don't understand that you're sitting on something that is really easily marketable if you just look at it yourself and go, yeah, what we do is great. I'm going to tell you, since we put out who's going to do the work, I've been seeing ads. I saw one for an electrical company here in Jacksonville, which is, I've spoken to so many businesses here, but also like garbage collection and things like that. Their websites are amazing. They talk about they're like a family. Man, you want to work with us. It's like every day is like a party here. Like they really have doubled down on this is the place you want to be. And there are other electrical firms in this town, but let me tell you, our people here have been here for a long time. They're loyal because we're close and it's awesome. And I'm watching that messaging change. And I like to think that in some small way, I've played a part in that. And I think that that's what everybody needs to learn is if you believe that what you're doing is valuable, then you need to think about why you think that way. And then you've got to translate that out.
What are the indicators that employers should pay closer attention to, in the next few years? Signals that kind of tell us, hey, things are stabilizing, things are getting tighter, or maybe there's some different shape altogether. What are one or two things that you think, hey, make sure you keep up with the newspapers on this?
Yeah. Well, some of this stuff's a little embedded in the data itself. So one of the things that we kind of been watching was the labor force got really gnarly in 21, 22. We ended up solving that problem by basically granting asylum status to a number of countries, and that solved the problem. So we brought in a number of people and said, hey, you're going to get citizenship. We're going to get you your visa. You can grant asylum. Well, then we revoked all of that this year. So the ability to understand what's happening in our labor force, which is all out there, all on the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. The employment report comes out every month. It came out today, by the way. It came out this morning. We talk about how many jobs were added. We can tell you which industries we're in, but you can go to the unemployment side and see, well, what's going on with the labor force. We also could see today that a lot of people who said they were unemployed in the most recent month were people who said they were re-entrants. So not people who lost their jobs, but people who maybe had lost their job early in the year, but were coming back in, or maybe they worked years ago, but they're coming back in. Why would that be the case? Because maybe their spouse just lost a job. They were laid off. So these people are coming in and they're looking for work. These kind of things, being aware of what's the mindset of a person looking for a job right now. Are they desperate or are they feeling really good about their prospects? How many people are hiring the same thing that you're trying to hire? Now, obviously I work at Lightcast. That's what we do. But we're tracking real time. Like, okay, you're trying to hire a welder in Phoenix. Well, here's how many companies are trying to do it at the exact same time as you are, and here's what they're paying. Okay, so you should probably be aware of that. That way you can at least say, sometimes you get this, we get that hiring manager's epiphany moment where they're like, oh, I thought these were still like $20 an hour. And you're like, yeah, bro, like 7 years ago. It's now $35 an hour. And then they go, I'm going to have to go back and have a separate conversation with my leadership and everything. You're like, yeah, you're going to have to go do that. And I think that kind of stuff is, being situationally aware will put you in the right frame of mind so that when you talk to a person, you go, wow, this person's really not qualified. and this is the only person who applied for my job. Maybe I didn't do this right. Maybe I didn't do that right. And what you didn't realize is, no, the market's really nasty right now. In your particular market, the unemployment rate's 3%. If you don't know what that means, 3% is actually really, really tight. 2% is ridiculous. And there's some markets in the country like that. Knowing how that's changed over the year, where these things are trending, this stuff's all out there. You can find for any metro area, your unemployment rate, see what's happening with your labor force. You can go into county business patterns, or there's quick facts, which is a thing that tells you, the county I live in Florida, 50% of the people in my county have a college degree. That's insane. Most counties, it's like 25 to 35%, but we're 50%. So you try to hire a skilled trades person or a manufacturing person in my county, good luck, because we don't have them here. Like they're very well consumed. And I think those are things that you can be aware of. Like, what do you know about the market that you're in? Is it a good market for skilled trades? Is there a lot of competition? And by the way, you're not just competing against your competitors who do the same thing as you. You're competing against anybody who could hire somebody like this person and pay them better. So if a waiter is paying $65,000 a year and you're paying $35,000 a year, and all they need is a person who's got some drive and is willing to serve food around, they're taking the $65,000 job.
One of the things that I don't think we talk about a lot is putting more of a focus on hiring for minority candidates in the skilled trades, hiring for women in the skilled trades. I wish I saw more of it happening, because I really think that, one, they tend to be groups that are underpaid in general when it comes from, status for families. This is a great way to bring them in to where they're getting paid at least at level. What do you see in your own studies, research, that people are making that happen more often? Do you see a rise in those two groups?
Anecdotally, the answer would be yes, but the data is not showing it. So, one of the tables we have in Rising Storm, 98% of plumbers, 98% of auto mechanics, 97% of electricians. I mean, these are all men. Now, how they break out around ethnicities is another interesting thing. Drywall, 60% of all people who are doing drywall in this country are foreign born. So we're relying on immigrants to do drywall in this country. That's one of the highest professions in this country when it comes to foreign born. So we really struggle to convince anybody here to do that kind of work. And so what we've relied on are people coming with those particular skill sets from other countries. But like I said, this past year, we undid that. So we revoked that status. So you're going to see a surge of people going in the next year. Business was fairly flat. I will tell you, I talked to a lot of construction companies this year, couldn't find workers. That was a big problem. They're aware of, obviously that dependency on foreign-born labor. But I think sometimes this is a big issue, and it's a tough issue for me to talk about as well, because what you're trying to do is, if this is about creating opportunity and doing these kind of things, then you should be seeing a lot of intentionality, whether it be inner city schools. And by the way, there's a phenomenal school district in North Carolina. I talked to this guy at lunch after I spoke up there, and they are literally bringing these kids up where they're like teaching them farming, and then they like run a farmer's market. So they're involved in the planting, the cultivating, but they also teach them business skills so that when they go to sell it, and they've been watching these kids kind of grow up and go into the various farms and stuff around there. And I think some people would look at that and say, well, I think we should be driving, these people need to be going to college. And I think, once again, it's this old messaging of what's valuable. What's really valuable, what's sustainable would be making sure that people were introduced to jobs that they're going to be able to make a long career. It's not a fly-by-night technology profession that could be gone in 2 years. This is an investment into your life. And by the way, in 4 or 5 years, you may be running your own firm at that point. We need to be selling that aspect, the dignity, the amazing part of being in control of your schedule and your future is something that is being really undersold. And I think that's one of the things that actually holds us back. Is I think sometimes there's this, well, we want to see them better represented in universities, better represented here. And it's like, it's because you're stuck in this 1970s, 80s mindset of what's valuable. when
Mm.
society is crying out and telling you what's actually really valuable is not the mouths that are being fed. So I
And,
think
and
that we could do more work there.
and do you see that also with women in general? Because women have since World War II have been
Yep.
moving into roles like this, but for some reason in skilled trades, it seems to be thwarted. Any idea as to why, and are there changes on the way that could help that? Um, Maybe
Well,
get
there's
more
one
women.
easy one. And the easy one is if I am the only female in a, 20 person, you know, skilled trades, name your skilled trade. I'm the only one there. You're not necessarily dealing with people maybe who took tolerance classes at their
Mm,
business, and so the environment might be a little bit more hostile.
okay.
You may be dealing with clients who, when you show up, say, oh, because maybe they're Luddites or whatever, and don't understand, you know, how things have changed. I think there's part of that. I've not really had that said to me though. I was in Atlanta and I went to it's the skilled trades thing that they do for all the high schools that's competitive. They bring in the top ones for every skilled trade that's out there, all of them. And they all compete in this competition. And it's an unbelievable experience. And while I was there, this young woman who was graduating high school, I started talking to her and ended up walking with her for a while. And this was one of my favorite things that happened to me this past year. It was an amazing experience. And she had been doing carpentry because her father built houses. So she would go to the work site with him and eventually learned all of these things. And she was
Wow.
really good. And I'm like, oh, so are you going to do this? And she goes, no, I'm going into structural sheet metal for ships. See, I'm going to be like a structural sheet metal welder and everything like that. And I was like, okay, you're like the most amazing young woman
Wow.
I've ever met in my life. She was amazing. She was driven. She was passionate. She was excited. She was proud of everything. And I'm like, okay, how did that happen? Because she grew up in a household with a father who took her, I'm sure he may have offered it. Maybe other daughters wouldn't accept it, but she did it. Well, there we go way back to how this whole thing started. You have to expose people to these things. You have to do it at a young age. You've got to show them that there's a path there. That I don't even want to call it's about breaking down barriers. Forget that. It's not everything has to be some inspirational poster. Sometimes it's just somebody going, you know what, I like to work with my hands and I want to do this. And somebody who respects them going, I think you could do that. And I'm going to take you under my wing and I'm going to teach you these things and we're going to do these things. And I think sometimes we wait for, or not sometimes, a lot of times, almost all the time, we wait for people to come to us. But
Mm.
people like that, for young women especially, they're probably not going to come to you. You're going to have to go get them. And if that happens by going to schools and going, hey, we set up our skilled trades thing at the trade fair at our local high school. And it's like, yo, that's not the same as pre-marketing, going to the teachers, anything going, I want these to go specifically into the young women's hands, and I want them to read these things. And when I get there, I expect to see a line of people at the booth because we messaged this right. And by the way, if they say no, we really weren't interested, I want you to ask them why they're not, so
Mm.
that we can fix that messaging going forward.
Ron, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. You've
Oh,
been super generous. I've learned a ton. I'm hoping if it's all right with you, I might reach out to you in a couple of months and pick your brain a little bit more.
yeah, we'll see where things are going. That's the thing about labor economics; it never stays still.
That's true. That's very true. Thank you so much for your time today.
Sure thing.